But it's a broken iron, she screamed. I've already bought a new one. Why would anyone want to store a broken iron? He dipped one hand gingerly into the kitchen bin to retrieve it. Well, you never know when, he started. But it's not going to come in useful one day. You know that. She waved her hands in front of his face in a vain attempt to focus his attention. And even in the unlikely event that it might come in handy one day in the far, far distant future, you won't be able to find it then anyway. He shrugged. Look, it won't take up any space in a carrier bag in the understairs cupboard. No, it won't, she said, because it's not bloody well going in there. She thought of the orderly rows of perfectly clean shoes that she'd arranged so neatly behind the understairs cupboard door. The door with the broken handle that he was supposed to have fixed 2 Christmases ago. He tutted. OK, fine. I'll just have to store it in my room. Oh, no, you don't. I haven't been able to hoover in there for weeks. I've forgotten what the carpet even looks like. Her eyes flitted around the kitchen, from her beautiful cut glass vase of fresh garden flowers on the window ledge to the infuriating, ever-dripping tap. She sighed as she looked him straight in the eye and said calmly, Listen, love, it's a broken iron. Please just get it shifted. He recoiled from the uncomfortable eye contact and stomped across to the fridge, yanking open the squeaky door to stare at everything and nothing, and to feel the cold air on his face. He pressed his forehead into the hard edge of a shelf, and under his breath he hissed, For God's sake. Then out loud, Right, fine, you win. I'll just have to buy another plastic box and store it in the garage. She shouted at the back of his head. With the other 100 or more plastic boxes, you mean? Just listen to yourself. Can't you hear that you've got a problem? His jaw stiffened. I have not got a problem. With his free hand he grabbed a milk carton and spun the lid free with his thumb, an action perfected after thousands of repetitions. She sprang across the few feet of frayed carpet tiles and poked a hard finger repeatedly into his bicep to punctuate her point. Well, I've asked you nicely every single day for over 10 years to start throwing this useless old tat away, and you completely refuse to see sense. He ignored the physical contact and made a defiant show of swigging greedily from the milk bottle before returning it to the door and wiping his mouth on his sleeve. Nagged, he said. What? She drew her neck back and cocked her head. Nagged, he repeated, turning slowly to meet her gaze. You haven't asked nicely, you've nagged. You've nagged me every single day for over 10 years. Do you know what that feels like? She looked up at the crumbling plaster and flaky paint of the ceiling, clenched her fists at the end of stiff arms and vented a silent scream of exasperation. Oh, don't be so dramatic. He rolled his eyes and then continued to stare at her with well-honed impassivity, until she felt compelled to look back at him again. He adopted a patronising tone. Anyway, you'll be pleased to know that I've found a solution to your little problem. If you think you could just calm down for 10 seconds, then I might be able to tell you. She glared at him and waited. He let the silence grow for a few long seconds as he slowly closed the fridge door and then said, OK, the other day I rang a professional off-site storage company and got a quote for them to store all the boxes. So you won't need to constantly nag me anymore. You can totally reclaim my man drawer, you can do what you like with the understairs cupboard, you can hoover my room if you must, and you can even get your precious car into the garage if that seems so important to you. I'll tell you what, I'll go on a diet too so that even I take up less room in my own house. Happy now? She stared at him and crossed her arms. Then she asked firmly, How much? Never you mind about that. He barged past her and leaned on the chipped draining board, talking to the garden rather than directly to her. Believe me, it's money well spent to stop your nagging. Oh, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure you'll work hard to find some other reason to nag me, but at least you won't be able to nag me about storage ever again. How much? She asked again. He turned away from the window. Well, it's quite good value considering the number of boxes. And it's also completely secure and confidential, so no one will ever be able to stick their noses in and interfere with my stuff. How much? She insisted, raising her voice in ultimatum. Just over £100 a month, he said, casually rubbing his nose. And they can start this Saturday. Her face flushed red. "Stop right there! Enough is enough!" she spitted through gritted teeth. "If you dare start spending £100 a month of our money storing your stupid junk for absolutely no good reason, then we're finished. Do you understand that?" She glanced from the gleaming hob and spotless work surfaces to the disassembled radio that she always knew, despite his earnest promises, would never be fixed. "And do you know what else? I'll damn well take you to the cleaners in the divorce courts for unreasonable behaviour. You'll finally be out of this house and out of my life. You'll be lucky if you're left with £100 a month to spend on food and rent." She laughed hysterically, her eyes wild and wet. "What will you do with your precious clutter then, eh?" With one swipe of her forearm, she scattered the broken radio parts onto the floor. "Well, I hope you'll be very happy together, you bloody fool, you utter loser." She turned her back, leaned her head against the door jamb and started to sob. He felt the weight of the broken iron in his hands and looked across at the bin. Options flashed through his thoughts in a whirl of confusion, followed by the cold, calm clarity. Without even consciously thinking it through, he knew what he must do to restore the peace in this marriage. The next morning he rang the storage company. "Hello, yes, this is Mr. Collins. I called a couple of days ago about the short-term storage of around 120 plastic boxes, and you quoted me £149. Yes, well, I'm sorry to mess you about, but there's been a change of circumstances. I discussed it with my wife, and I'm afraid we need to cancel that order." He waited until the remote sound of keyboard clacking stopped. "While I'm on, though, could I get you to quote me for another requirement?" "OK, yeah, great, thanks. Yeah, could you please quote me for the long-term storage of a single secure box?" "Yes, just one." "The size? Hang on." He looked down at the crumpled mess on the kitchen floor, next to the broken and now stained iron that he knew would come in handy one day. "Well, I reckon about 6 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot ought to cover it."